Commander Ilara Chen jolted awake to the scream of metal tearing apart. Her drop pod tumbled through the void, emergency lights pulsing crimson across her face. Blood streaked her wrists where she'd fought against the restraints, the memories flooding back in nauseating waves. The Vraxian warships appearing without warning. The ultimatum broadcast in that clicking, emotionless voice. One human sacrifice to appease the guardians of the Forbidden Zone, or your vessel, and all aboard will be harvested. Her crew hadn't wanted to choose. Captain Marcus had locked himself in his quarters for 6 hours, while the Vraxians waited with cold patience. In the end, he'd emerged with hollow eyes, looked directly at her, and whispered, "It has to be you, Ilara." Not because they hated her, because they believed she might survive. Your combat training, your adaptability scores, your xenobiology background, he'd explained as security dragged her thrashing body toward the airlock. His final words, "Survive, Ilara." That's an order, still echoed in her mind as the pod's navigation system screamed warnings of catastrophic failure. The planet loomed before her, a twilight world of obsidian mountains and strange, pulsing lights. No time for fear now. Ilara forced her shaking fingers to bypass the navigation computer, manually triggering the emergency thrusters milliseconds before impact. The crash landing shattered the pod's exoskeleton and 3 of her ribs. Gasping for breath in the thin, copper-scented air, she dragged herself from the wreckage. Each movement sent jagged knives of pain through her chest. Medical training took over, assessed the situation, prioritized survival. Planet: uncharted. Classified as Forbidden Zone FC-2187 in Vraxian star charts. Atmosphere: marginally breathable. Oxygen levels at 17%, high concentrations of noble gases. Current status: impact trauma. Potential internal bleeding. 6 days of emergency rations salvageable. Primary threat: unknown. The Vraxians called them monsters. Ilara limped toward a formation of rock that might offer shelter, keenly aware of the rapidly fading light. The planet seemed locked in perpetual dusk, its distant sun hanging low on the horizon. Around her, strange vegetation glowed with internal bioluminescence, not plants as Earth understood them, but something else entirely. The blue-green fronds swayed toward her as she passed, despite the absence of wind. Reaching the rock formation, she discovered a shallow cave and quickly established a defensive position. The pod's emergency beacon lay shattered beyond repair. The communicator still functioned, but with no one to contact. Survival kit inventory, water purification tablets, medical nanogle, emergency rations, multipurpose tool, thermal blanket. "I'm not dying here," she whispered to herself, applying nanogle to her visible wounds. Not like this. As night fell completely, the landscape transformed. The bioluminescent vegetation intensified, casting an ethereal blue glow across the plains. In the distance, crystal formations began to resonate with harmonic tones that made her teeth ache. Somewhere far off, a sound rose that resembled no animal Ilara had ever studied, part whale song, part metallic grinding. Then silence, a silence so absolute it pressed against her eardrums like physical weight. The ground beneath her trembled in rhythmic patterns. Not seismic activity, too regular, too purposeful, almost like footsteps or a heartbeat. Blood from a cut above her eye trickled down her temple as Ilara pressed herself against the cave wall, clutching her makeshift weapon. The vibrations intensified, approaching her position with methodical precision. With absolute certainty, Commander Ilara Chen realized 3 things. She wasn't simply being watched from afar. She wasn't just being tracked. She was being hunted. And whatever was hunting her understood exactly where she was hiding. By the 3rd day, Ilara had established a perimeter of makeshift sensors fashioned from pod debris. Pressure plates connected to small chimes that would alert her to anything approaching her shelter. Sleep came in 20-minute intervals, her body upright against the cave wall, hand clutching a spear crafted from a jagged piece of hull metal bound to a composite strut. Her rations would last 3 more days if stretched carefully. Water was less of a concern. She discovered a geothermal spring 2 kilometers south, its mineral content high but tolerable after filtration. Each night brought new terrors, skittering sounds just beyond her firelight, shadows that moved with deliberate purpose between rock formations, and once, a silhouette so massive it momentarily eclipsed the starfield visible from her cave entrance. Yet nothing attacked. Nothing revealed itself fully. "Observing me," she murmured, recording observations in a journal improvised from emergency manual pages, studying my behavior patterns, intelligent predation strategy. On the third sunset, Ilara ventured to the spring for water collection. The pain in her ribs had subsided to a dull throb thanks to the nanogal treatments. As she filled her canteen, a flash of prismatic color caught her peripheral vision. She turned slowly. 20 meters away stood a creature unlike anything in Earth's evolutionary record. Whip-thin, its body covered in translucent scales that refracted light into impossible spectra. Most disturbing were its feeding appendages. 3 separate jaw-like structures that opened independently of each other, lined with barbed hooks rather than teeth. It tensed, preparing to strike. Ilara calculated her options with cold precision. The spring behind her. Cliff face to her left. Open ground to her right. No cover for 30 meters. The creature lunged, faster than her eye could track. Ilara's spear shattered against its armored hide, the impact sending fresh waves of pain through her injured ribs. She stumbled backward, her boots slipping on the slick rocks. Improvise. Adapt. Her hand closed around her emergency beacon's remains. As the creature coiled for another strike, she angled the beacon's reflective surface to capture the dim starlight, creating a flash of concentrated light directly into the creature's primary sensory cluster. It recoiled, emitting a high-pitched keening. In that momentary confusion, Ilara jammed her communicator's exposed power cell against the water where the creature's limbs touched the spring. The electrical discharge traveled through the mineralized water, shocking the predator with enough current to collapse its nervous system. As the creature's body sank into the spring, the air filled with a chittering chorus, thousands of tiny sounds combining into a discordant symphony that seemed to come from everywhere at once. They emerged from hidden burrows and shadow-cloaked crevices around the spring. The monsters the Vraxians had sacrificed her to appease. Towering forms with iridescent exoskeletons that shifted colors like oil on water, their bodies balanced on jointed limbs that moved with unsettling grace. Their heads, if they could be called that, bore no recognizable features except complex arrangements of sensory organs surrounding central orifices lined with delicate, moving cilia. Ilara stood her ground, turning slowly to keep as many as possible in view. She counted 7, then 12, then gave up as more continued to appear. Despite her racing heart, she maintained a controlled breathing pattern. Her xenobiology training warned against showing fear responses recognizable across species boundaries. That night, she feigned sleep inside her shelter, counting the entities surrounding her camp. 12 distinct individuals had formed a perimeter, their chitinous bodies creating a living wall between her and the rest of the planet. When she could maintain the pretense no longer, Ilara sat up and faced them directly. "If you're going to kill me," she said quietly, "do it now." One stepped forward, taller than the others, its exoskeleton bearing intricate patterns that seemed almost like written language. It moved with deliberate steps until it stood just beyond arm's reach. Then, with fluid grace, it extended a limb toward her, the end unfurled like a blooming flower, revealing a structure resembling nothing so much as a neural interface crown composed of living tissue, pulsing with bioluminescent light. The message was unmistakable. It wanted inside her mind. "Touch me and die," Ilara threatened, brandishing her makeshift weapon with steady hands despite her exhaustion. Yet even as survival instincts screamed warnings, scientific curiosity pulled at her consciousness. The living crown hovered inches from her face, emitting a scent like ozone mixed with honey. Bioluminescent patterns rippled across its surface in complex sequences, a language of light she couldn't decipher. The void-born entity remained motionless, patient, as if understanding her internal conflict. What makes a xenobiologist? Her professor's words echoed from academy training. The willingness to risk everything for understanding. Ilara lowered her weapon. "This is either first contact or my execution," she whispered. "Either way, it's for science." She nodded once, and the neural crown made contact with her temples. White-hot pain exploded behind her eyes. Ilara collapsed, her body convulsing as neural pathways never meant for alien communion were forcibly reconfigured. Her screams echoed across the twilight landscape, reverberating from crystalline formations and disappearing into the endless darkness above. Then, merciful darkness. She awakened suspended in a translucent, amber fluid that somehow allowed her to breathe. Her body floated in a chamber composed of living tissue, its walls pulsing with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Through semi-transparent sections, she glimpsed a vast underground cathedral of stone and bioluminescence where hundreds of the creatures moved in coordinated patterns. But the true horror wasn't what she saw outside. It was what she saw inside her mind. Her consciousness had shattered into fragments, each experiencing the world through different perspectives simultaneously. She saw herself floating in the chamber through dozens of different sensory arrays, felt the thoughts of countless alien minds pressing against her own. Less than we are void-born, greater than. The thought wasn't spoken or heard. It simply appeared in her consciousness, carrying emotional resonances unlike any human feeling. Ancient pride stretching back millions of years, recent desperation carrying the bitter taste of extinction fears, and a profound, crushing loneliness that made her own isolation seem trivial by comparison. Hours blurred into days as Ilara's mind adapted to the psychic network. The process was excruciating, like learning a language where each word caused physical pain, where grammar rules rewired her neural architecture. Gradually, she began to understand. Less than not hive mind. Neural democracy, greater than she managed to project back, grasping their self-concept. Less than individuals within collective, greater than. A ripple of approval spread through the network. The void-born weren't a single consciousness, but billions of individual minds connected through a psychic medium, each contributing to a collective while maintaining autonomy. Their society had been governed by queens, not rulers, but synchronizers with specialized neural architecture that could harmonize conflicting impulses across the collective, focusing their combined capabilities toward unified goals. Less than last queen. When, greater than, Ilara managed to form the complex thought pattern that represented temporal inquiry, the response came as a shared memory, a queen unlike the others, not a void-born biology, dying as her connection to the collective deteriorated. The emotional impact nearly drowned Ilara's consciousness. Centuries of slow decline. Great works abandoned, unified purpose fragmented into competing priorities. Then came the most disturbing revelation. Images of humans being delivered to the planet's surface by Vraxian ships. Dozens of sacrifices over many years. Each human dying horribly as their minds shattered under the psychic contact. Less than why survive, where others failed, greater than, she asked. The elder voidborn who had offered the neural crown approached her suspension chamber. Its consciousness touched hers with surprising gentleness. Less than others' minds rigid. Yours, flexible. Military neural combat training. Experimental. Makes you compatible, greater than. Ilara understood with sudden clarity. Her specialized training, the brutal neural reprogramming she'd endured to resist enemy psychic warfare, had inadvertently prepared her for this moment. She wasn't just another sacrifice. She was the only human whose mind could withstand integration with the Voidborn collective. And they had been waiting for her, or someone like her, for a very long time. Ilara's consciousness expanded as the Voidborn guided her deeper into their collective memory. The experience was like falling through fractured mirrors, each shard reflecting a different moment in time from countless perspectives simultaneously. Less than show me truth, Vraxians. Beginning. Greater than she projected the thought pattern, struggling to maintain her sense of self amidst the vast alien perspective. The response came as a cascade of vivid memories, so real she could taste the metallic atmosphere of 5 centuries past. Vraxian colony ships appearing in orbit, sleek, predatory vessels scanning the mineral-rich world. Their initial surveys detected no sentient life, the void-born subterranean civilization, invisible to orbital technology, calibrated for carbon-based biology. She witnessed through 1,000 synchronized memories as Vraxian pioneers broke ground for their first settlement. Their drilling equipment punctured the outer membrane of a major void-born hive node, releasing psychic energy that had been carefully contained for millennia. The backlash was catastrophic. Hundreds of Vraxians collapsed as alien thoughts invaded their minds. Some clawed their own eyes out. Others took their own lives to escape the mental intrusion. The survivors transmitted frantic messages to their fleet. The Vraxian military response materialized within days. Orbital bombardment that shattered the planet's crust in targeted strikes, destroying most surface access points to the Voidborn network. Thousands of Voidborn died as sections of their interconnected habitats collapsed or flooded with magma. Less than we were sleeping, greater than came the collective thought. Less than not expecting sky visitors, not prepared greater than. But the Voidborn queen of that era, a being of immense psychic ability, retaliated. Concentrating the collective consciousness, she projected focused psychic energy that disabled Vraxian ships and weaponry, inducing madness in those whose minds were most vulnerable to suggestion. A stalemate emerged. The Vraxians could devastate the planet's surface, but not eliminate the deeply entrenched Voidborn. The Voidborn could defend themselves, but lacked the technology to pursue the Vraxians beyond their world. Eventually, negotiators established an uneasy truce. The Vraxians would leave the planet and a surrounding buffer zone untouched, while the weakened Voidborn would not expand beyond their world. But here came the revelation that sent shockwaves of nausea through Ilara's human consciousness. The Vraxian leadership, unable to admit defeat to what they termed a primitive species, systematically rewrote their own history. The Forbidden Zone became a place of religious significance. The Voidborn were transformed in official records from sentient beings with territorial rights into mythological demons demanding appeasement through sacrifice. Decades later, when humans were encountered during Vraxian expansion, their scientists discovered human brains possessed unusual psychic potential. Thus began the true plan. Find a human capable of establishing a permanent connection with the Voidborn collective, creating a backdoor for Vraxian control. I'm their weapon, Ilara realized with horror, the thought escaping as both words and mental projection. Their Trojan horse. Less than you are much more greater than came the reply from countless minds simultaneously. Less than you are our salvation greater than. As this revelation settled in her consciousness, Ilara experienced a sudden expansion of awareness. The collective knowledge of the Voidborn became accessible. Millions of years of history, science that treated the boundary between biology and technology as an arbitrary distinction, mathematics that described dimensions beyond human comprehension. Most disturbing of all, she sensed approaching Vraxian ships through the psychic echoes of their crews. They were coming not for another routine sacrifice, but because something had changed. They had detected the unusual activity around her landing site, the coordinated Voidborn movements that hadn't been observed in centuries. Less than they come to harvest, greater than the collective whispered in her mind. Less than not just you. All of us. Their empire falters. They need weapons greater than. Through the telepathic link, Ilara glimpsed the face of the Vraxian commander, Supreme Inquisitor Craftful, his scared visage bearing the marks of previous psychic attacks, his left eye replaced with a neural dampener specifically designed to block telepathic intrusion. "How long do we have?" she asked, her voice strange in her own ears after days of psychic communication. "Less than 3 planetary rotations, perhaps less greater than." Ilara's consciousness narrowed to a single point of crystal clarity. "Then we prepare for war." Ilara's transformation began with microscopic changes, neural pathways reconfiguring, synapses multiplying exponentially, glial cells evolving new functions to process the vast void-born network. She felt each alteration as a series of tiny lightning strikes behind her eyes, her body seized by periodic tremors that left her gasping. "What exactly am I becoming?" she demanded during a moment of lucidity, addressing the elder voidborn who had first offered the neural crown. "Less than you remain human, greater than," it responded, its consciousness touching hers with careful precision. "Less than, but you become more. The queen is neither ruler nor tyrant, but catalyst. Through you, our fragmented consciousness finds harmony. Through us, your singular perspective finds expansion greater than." In a chamber deep within the hive, Ilara was immersed in a pool of bioluminescent fluid that accelerated her neurological development. The liquid burned like acid, then soothed like a balm as it rewrote her sensory architecture. Her eyes developed nictitating membranes that filtered the spectrum differently, revealing layers of light invisible to normal human perception. Her skin became hypersensitive, capable of detecting electromagnetic fields and atmospheric changes with extraordinary precision. Most profound were the changes to her mind. As her consciousness expanded, she gained access to the memory archive of previous queens, not voidborn themselves, but other species long extinct. Each had brought unique cognitive frameworks that advanced voidborn civilization in unexpected ways. She witnessed the reign of a gaseous entity that taught them atmospheric manipulation, allowing the voidborn to regulate their planet's unstable climate. She experienced life through the senses of a crystalline being whose understanding of light transformed voidborn architecture. She shared the perspective of an aquatic consciousness whose fluid dynamics revolutionized their transportation systems. When she emerged from the enhancement pool, her body dripping with luminescent residue, Ilara discovered she could control the bioluminescent flora with mere thought. A gesture brought dormant defense systems online, massive organic structures that had protected the voidborn for millennia, but had fallen dormant without a queen's guidance. With focused concentration, she could even sense the thoughts of her human crewmates aboard the distant Vraxian vessels. Their fear and confusion came to her as faint whispers, but tangible enough to confirm they still lived. Yet doubt haunted her. During the final preparations, she sat alone in the royal chamber, tears streaming down her face. "I'll lose myself," she whispered, examining her hands where luminescent patterns had begun to form beneath her skin. "Everything human about me will dissolve into your collective." The eldest voidborn approached, its consciousness touching hers with unexpected gentleness. It shared the memory of the last queen's death, not from age or injury, but from isolation. Cut off from her birth species, surrounded by minds fundamentally different from her own, she had slowly withdrawn from the collective, her loneliness eventually manifesting as a fatal cellular breakdown. "Less than we need not just your mind's architecture, greater than," the elder explained, "less than but your humanity, your emotional complexity, your capacity for individual choice alongside collective good. Your ability to create art from chaos. These are not weaknesses to be absorbed, but strengths to be preserved greater than." Ilara understood then what the voidborn truly sought. Not assimilation, but synthesis. Not a puppet, but a partner. Not a weapon of war, but a bridge between worlds. Standing at the precipice of irrevocable change, she made her decision. Not with resignation, but with fierce purpose. She submerged herself in the final alchemical bath that would complete her transformation, her consciousness exploding outward to touch every voidborn mind simultaneously. As the last of her purely human thoughts gave way to something greater, Ilara issued her first command as queen. "Prepare for war." The collective responded with a single unified thought. "Less than we serve, greater than." Across the underground hive, ancient mechanisms activated. Warrior castes emerged from dormancy chambers, their exoskeletons reconfiguring for battle. Beneath the surface, the planet itself seemed to awaken to its queen's will. The Vraxians were coming to harvest a weapon. they would find instead a force of nature. The Vraxian dreadnought Inevitable Dominion dropped out of hyperspace with 2 destroyer escorts, weeks ahead of their scheduled sacrifice run. From her psychic vantage point deep within the hive, Ilara perceived the ship's commander through the terrified minds of human prisoners aboard. Supreme Inquisitor Krav Thol stood on his command bridge, his scared face bearing the marks of previous voidborn psychic attacks. Where his left eye should have been, a neural dampener glowed with sickly blue light, technology specifically designed to block telepathic intrusion. Around him, officers monitored sensor readings with increasing agitation. The test subject has succeeded beyond parameters, he informed his officers, his voice a rasping whisper from vocal cords damaged in previous encounters. Something has changed in the monster hive. Prepare the harvester teams and the neural disruptors. We take the human and as many specimens as we can collect. Anything that resists will be reduced to ash. Through her connection to the collective, Ilara felt the Vraxians' desperation. Their once mighty empire was fracturing under rebellions and economic collapse. This operation wasn't sanctioned by Central Command. It was Krav Thol's last desperate gambit to obtain a biological weapon powerful enough to secure his political position. Dropships screamed through the atmosphere, their engines burning hot against thermal sensors Ilara had established throughout the surface biome. They deployed elite Vraxian shock troops, tall, lean predators equipped with psionic dampening fields and molecular disassemblers designed specifically for voidborn physiology. The troops established a perimeter around Ilara's original landing site, finding only the empty pod and signs of her survival. Their commander ordered an expansion of the search grid, unaware they were being observed by thousands of eyes hidden in the landscape itself. One soldier discovered a strange arrangement of bioluminescent plants and reached to collect a sample. The plants suddenly emitted a pulse that short-circuited his armor systems. As panic spread through the Vraxian ranks, the ground beneath their encampment liquefied, swallowing equipment and soldiers alike. In orbit, Krav Thol slammed his fist against a console. "Deploy the suppression array," he ordered. "Full-spectrum psychic dampening. I want every inch of that hellscape silent." From the 3 ships, satellites deployed into low orbit, forming a triangular grid. When activated, they would blanket the region in frequencies designed to disrupt the voidborn neural network. Before the array could activate, the Earth near the Vraxian landing zone began to tremble. A massive structure emerged from below, not a natural formation, but a living artillery platform controlled directly by the collective consciousness. Confused chatter filled the Vraxian communication channels as more organic structures breached the surface, surrounding their position. From the chaos, Ilara emerged, but not as they expected. Her skin now bore luminescent patterns matching voidborn royal markings, flowing like liquid circuitry beneath her human exterior. Her eyes had changed, irises now iridescent with facets that reflected light in impossible ways. Her movements exhibited inhuman grace as she walked barefoot across ground that should have burned human flesh. Behind her rose a living wall of voidborn warriors, their exoskeletons configured for battle, moving with a synchronization never before witnessed by Vraxian forces. "I am Commander Ilara Chen of Earth Science Vessel Horizon," she announced, her voice layered with harmonic undertones that made the Vraxians' neural dampeners spark and smoke. "And I am Queen of the Voidborn." On his command bridge, Krav Thol felt a presence brush against his mind, despite his protective implant. For the first time in decades of military service, fear crawled up his spine. "You threw me to the monsters." Ilara smiled as the earth trembled beneath the Vraxians' feet, revealing the massive organic artillery of the hive. "But I was their queen." The words echoed across every Vraxian communication channel simultaneously as the first salvo of biological weaponry launched toward the orbiting ships. The battle for the Forbidden Zone had begun. Supreme Inquisitor Krav Thol responded to Ilara's declaration with overwhelming firepower. Orbital cannons targeted the exposed hive entrances, while dropships deployed neural disruptor arrays, devices reverse-engineered from dead void-born specimens that emitted frequencies specifically calibrated to shred telepathic connections. The first barrage nearly severed Ilara's connection to the collective. She fell to her knees as thousands of void-born voices screamed in her mind, then fell silent. Blood trickled from her nose and ears as she struggled to maintain consciousness. "Predictable," she gasped, a smile forming despite the pain. She had counted on the Vraxians' reliance on technological solutions and their fundamental misunderstanding of the void-born neural network. Drawing on her military training, Ilara implemented battle tactics no previous void-born queen had conceived, rather than maintaining a centralized psychic command structure vulnerable to disruption. She fragmented the collective into autonomous cellular units that could function independently while maintaining limited local communication, a strategy inspired by Earth's guerrilla warfare doctrine. "Adapt," she whispered, the command rippling through the network in waves that bypassed the Vraxian disruptors. The battle transformed into a nightmarish game of three-dimensional chess. Voidborn warriors used the planet's extensive tunnel networks to emerge behind Vraxian lines, dragging screaming soldiers into darkness. Bioluminescent flora, reconfigured by Ilara's commands, released spores that clogged mechanical systems and obscured visual sensors. When the Vraxians adapted their dampening fields, the Voidborn responded by communicating through subsonic vibrations transmitted through the ground itself. Aboard the inevitable Dominion, Ilara extended her consciousness toward the human prisoners, primarily scientists and engineers captured from research vessels like her own. Through brief, flickering moments of contact, she implanted simple but effective instructions. The resulting rebellion wasn't large, but it was strategically targeted. A xenobiologist from the research vessel, Ganymede, sabotaged the ship's environmental systems. A physicist from Earth's Lunar Academy overloaded power conduits on 3 decks. Engineers from the colony ship New Horizon compromised security protocols, allowing dozens of prisoners to access escape pods. The pods launched on collision courses with disruptor arrays, creating gaps in the suppression net. Through these openings, Ilara's consciousness expanded upward, touching the minds of Vraxian crew members with surgically precise psychic attacks. On the ground, Vraxian forces retreated toward extraction points, their casualties mounting. Craftful, face contorted with rage, ordered his final contingency, atmospheric ignition charges that would burn the oxygen from the planet's air, suffocating all organic life on the surface. "Better sterile than lost," he snarled as the countdown began. In a desperate gambit, Ilara channeled the combined psychic energy of the entire Voidborn collective into a focused beam targeted at Craftful himself. The neural dampener in his skull absorbed the initial assault, glowing white-hot against his skin. But Ilara had anticipated this. The attack wasn't meant to overcome his defenses directly. It was designed to overwhelm them through sustained pressure. For 17 excruciating seconds, she maintained the beam, blood vessels rupturing across her body from the strain. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the dampener failed. For the first time, Craftful experienced the full consciousness of the beings he'd spent his career demonizing. His mind broke under the weight of their collective memory, their suffering at Vraxian hands, their ancient knowledge and art and dreams. Collapsing on his command bridge, the Inquisitor whispered the abort codes for the atmospheric charges. Then, weeping, he opened a communication channel. "We surrender," he said, voice hollow with the horror of revelation. "The human captives, our ships, everything. Just contain whatever you've unleashed in my mind." Ilara's response came simultaneously through every communication device on all 3 Vraxian vessels. "Your terms are accepted. Prepare to receive my delegation." As the battle subsided, she allowed herself one moment of grim satisfaction. The monsters had found their queen, and the universe would never be the same. The Vraxian surrender ceremony took place on neutral ground, a massive platform constructed by Voidborn biotechnology to hover between Earth and sky. Ilara arrived not in military regalia, but adorned with living void-born architecture that flowed around her body like liquid armor, shifting in patterns that reflected her emotional state. Behind her stood representatives of the hive's many castes. Before her knelt the Vraxian command staff, their once proud postures broken by the psychic revelation of their empire's true history. Krav Full remained at the front, his neural dampener removed, his mind forever altered by what he had experienced. "These are my terms," Ilara said, her voice carrying both human inflection and void-born harmonics. "All human captives will be released immediately. The void-born's sovereignty over this world and 7 surrounding systems, once part of their ancient migration routes, will be formally recognized. You will provide reparations in the form of technology transfer to help rebuild what was destroyed centuries ago." She paused, eyes shifting to an inhuman iridescence that made the Vraxians flinch. "Most importantly, you will transmit the true history of this world to your central authority. Your mythology dies today. And should any Vraxian ship enter void-born space uninvited again, they will not face monsters." Her gaze lingered on Krav Full. "They will face me." The Supreme Inquisitor, once the embodiment of Vraxian military might, simply nodded. The truth had broken something fundamental in him, replacing arrogance with a hollow recognition of centuries of lies. As the Vraxian ships departed, Ilara faced her most difficult challenge: the arrival of human survivors, including her original crew. The Horizon's captain, Marcus Chen, stepped from the shuttle, aged a decade by stress since she last saw him. His eyes widened at her transformed appearance. "My God, Ilara, what have they done to you?" "Nothing I didn't choose," she responded, allowing him to see both her humanity and her otherness without apology. The reunion was fraught with complicated emotions. Some crew members could not look her in the eye, remembering their role in her sacrifice. Others viewed her with religious awe or scientific fascination. Her former lover, Dr. Sanjay Patel, attempted to embrace her, only to recoil from the alien presence he sensed beneath her familiar features. Rather than pressure them for immediate acceptance, Ilara unveiled her vision. A massive structure already growing at the boundary between surface and subsurface. A living embassy incorporating both human technology and void-born biology. Within its walls, humans could maintain their physiology and culture while interacting with void-born consciousness at levels they individually could tolerate. "I remain human," she told them, "but I have become more. The question now is whether humanity is ready to become more as well." Months later, as the human settlement flourished, and the first successful voluntary neural links were established between willing scientists and the void-born collective, Ilara stood at the embassy's highest point, gazing at the stars. Through her expanded consciousness, she sensed the vastness of space with unprecedented clarity, and the many intelligences watching from afar, curious about this unprecedented symbiosis. Captain Chen joined her, his initial fear transformed to cautious respect. "The Vraxian Central Authority has requested opening diplomatic channels," he informed her. "And Earth has finally responded to our transmissions. They're sending a delegation. Everyone wants to meet the woman who rules the monsters." Ilara smiled, the bioluminescent patterns across her skin pulsing with anticipation. "They don't understand yet. I don't rule the Voidborn." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting constellations no human telescope had yet observed. "We are merely the first alliance in a galaxy that has spent too long in fear of difference, and we have so much to show them." Around them, the embassy shifted subtly, its living architecture responding to the shared excitement of human and voidborn alike as they prepared to step onto a larger cosmic stage, not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals united by the most unexpected of bridges, a woman they threw to the monsters, never suspecting she would become their queen.